Hi guys. So to start off with, this particular video is about how to flip properties for beginners. This is a beginner entry level, and it may even be something that may be beneficial for those who are seasoned investors, but the audience is intended for those who are beginning to start flipping houses for the first time or just starting out. You want to start doing your research and you want to stay in the lower end of houses. And what I mean by that is, for example, you may decide that you want to flip houses that are below the $200,000 range. Typically, when you first start, you don't want to put a lot of money into something that you don't know what the results are going to be. So you want to minimize as much risk as possible. So I try to stay below the $200,000 mark in terms of the appraisal amount. That doesn't mean that that's how much I paid for it, but that's how much I stayed below in terms of the appraisal amount. Now, this is in the state of Louisiana. If you are getting a house that is below $200,000, that's a moderate house, and it may rent for maybe between $950 at the max $1,200 a month. So I want to stay in that range because in case that it doesn't sell, I wanted to be able to make sure that I will be able to rent it out. And that's another tip. You want to be able to make sure that you can rent the house out if you're unable to sell it. So first thing that you want to do is determine or do your research. There is a lot of online platforms that are available to assist in that search. So for example, you can use, and I have some linked down in the bio, you can go to propstream.com. You can go to a whole host of different online avenues in order to determine where these properties are. You want to find a wholesaler if you can, because a wholesaler can be your very best friend. And by that I mean that as a wholesaler, they usually find off-market deals. And you want to find an off-market deal because those deals are typically cheaper when you find off-market deals. And so, for example, I'm looking for the $55,000 range in order to purchase these $200,000 below appraisal. And that's just because I've done my numbers, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So you want to do plenty of research, and I have a video on how to find these properties and what you need to do, and it basically walks you through, and I'll also link that down in the bio. It basically walks you through how to start looking for properties, and you want to set a plan and you want to set a budget. And so I encourage you to actually look at that video if you can. So first thing, as I mentioned before, is to do your research. And while you're doing your research, there is several calculators that you can go online and find, and you can just do a Google search of flipping calculators. And I got mine. I don't remember where I got mine from, but there's several calculators that you can actually use online to determine where your numbers are. Never ever buy a particular property without actually determining or running your numbers. You can't just look at a property and say, that price sounds right, or I think that this is a good buy. You actually have to crunch your numbers or run your numbers, so to speak. And so what you will be doing in these calculators are inputting the information, and the information is going to just spew out for you. So in the calculators, you want to make sure that you look for a calculator that allows you to put how much you're going to be putting down, what the current interest rates are, what the monthly rent would be, or what the monthly note would be, which is very important. You want to look for a calculator that actually includes like whatever you're paying to the bank, insurances, any type of utilities, all of that type of thing. You want to make sure that you find a calculator, a flipping calculator, that will allow you to run your numbers to see if this is something that would be a good buy. The second thing that you want to do once you determine that the numbers actually work. So for example, like I said, typically if I buy a property for about $55,000 with the view of putting about $35,000 to $40,000 into a house, then that will give me a nice spread to be able to find a house that I can flip easily. And each house is going to be on a case-by-case basis. So you can't just say every house has to be $55,000, every house has to be $70,000. It is on a case-by-case basis. So you want to make sure that when you are crunching your numbers, that you do it every single time. So the second step is to create a budget. And what I mean by the budget is you've crunched your numbers, you've determined how much you want to buy the property for. You need to make sure that you also include at least 6 months worth of expenses. That means insurance, that means utilities, that means mortgage payments, that means everything that is involved in order to keep that particular property going until you actually sell it. So you also may need to include staging costs in case you decide to stage the property. So you want to create a budget, get a spreadsheet that you can use, and use that spreadsheet to keep a tally of all of your expenses so that you can monitor everything, because you may be so heavily involved in the construction processes that you're overlooking the money and may make some mistakes along the way in not keeping up with your money. So you want to get a spreadsheet and keep up with that information. The third step is, now that you've crunched your numbers, you want to make sure that you do a thorough research of the property. Have an inspection. If you do a local search of your inspectors in your area, in our area, they may range from $200 on up in terms of the cost in order to do an inspection. And I find that whenever you do an inspection or hire somebody to do an inspection, you have a more thorough research. Those are things that you can actually see yourself. Sometimes the inspection is very detailed. Well, most of the times it's very detailed, and it catches things that I wasn't able to see when I first went and looked at the property. So whenever I'm getting a flip done, I always have an inspection done, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to have an inspection done at the end. Whenever you finally find a buyer, you will know up front what the outcome of the inspection report will be. So have an inspection done once you find the property that you are interested in purchasing, and not only go by the numbers that you've crunched, but also go by the inspection report as well. Once you find the house that you're interested in, you've crunched your numbers, you've determined what type of renovation cost you're going to have. So with renovation costs, you will eventually get to a point where you can calculate in your mind by just looking at different things around the house as to what your cost will be. But you want to have that spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier, where you can have a tablet or something like that and use your tablet to walk around and say, okay, I need flooring, I need this, I need that. And then you take it to your local Home Depot or your Lowe's or your local lumber supply place, and they have services where they'll actually do the calculations for you and tell you about what you can expect in terms of your renovation costs. So you can go to the pro desk. So you can actually take your plans, or you can take your what you feel that you're going to need in order to renovate the property. You can take it to the pro desk, ask the pro desk to run a quote for you, and they will run a quote or an estimate for you, and they can give you an estimated cost of how much it would be for your materials in your renovation. So once you have determined how much your renovation costs are, your utilities, your insurance, whatever it is that you have in terms of holding costs, these are considered to be holding costs. So whatever those holding costs may be for you, then you want to also plug those into your flipping calculator. So you have the amount of the property, you have your holding cost, and you have your renovation cost. All of these are things that you're going to put into your flipping calculator or your renovation calculator to calculate the cost of how much it would be monthly in order to carry this particular house while you're flipping. I typically give myself at least 6 months while I am flipping a house, and usually I can sell it before the 6 months. I've actually been able to luckily sell them within 3 months. I've only had one house where I was not able to sell it within the 3 month time period, but I was able to sell it within the 6 month time frame. So whenever you do your renovations, you want to make sure that you have good quality renovations. You want to fix it right the first time. I always tell my son, do it right the first time so that you don't have to do it again. So I mentioned about inspectors. Whatever the inspection report is, you want to make sure that everything is done on that inspection report, because again, the inspector is probably going to come whenever you have an offer on the house, and you want to have that information up front of what you can expect on an inspection report. So you want to do high quality renovations, hire a team. So in order to find your team, when I started doing it, I did not have a team. I didn't even actually have experience in flipping houses. For some reason, I read a book. I came across a book. I don't even remember. Well, I know what the name of the book is. It's called Flip to Freedom. I read that book by Sean Terry, and that book opened my eyes to basically a lot. And so I didn't know the difference between a 1x4 and a 2x4. I didn't know anything about construction. But that book inspired me, and that book helped me to make a decision that this is something that I think that I can do, and I set out to do it. And so when I read that book, like I said, I didn't have a crew at all. And so what I did was I pretty much basically hung out at Home Depot and Lowe's, and I had my ears open for people in that particular type of niche. And so I would collect cards from them, and then I would ride around to different neighborhoods where I would see actually somebody doing construction or doing some renovation on a house. And I would go into that house boldly and take a look around to see what type of work that person did, and if I were pleased with that particular person's work. And then I would get their cards, and then I would call them. And that's basically how I formed my team that I have now. I did my research on my team, and so you will over time get to know which ones you can use, which ones you can trust, which ones will do a good job, and which ones won't. So that's how I found my crew, and that is a suggestion that I think is really good. I mean, it takes nothing, and you want somebody who can come and give you estimates for free. And you want to join Facebook and any type of social media websites that will have investment groups, and those investment groups will have people who they recommend typically. So make sure that you join investments groups. Make sure you join social media investment groups, because that's where you find a whole host of information that is free. And most of the times investors help each other. So once you've renovated your property, once you found your crew, you will have some ups and downs. And those ups and downs will help you learn for the next process. So don't consider it as something that is bad whenever you make mistakes. Each mistake that I made on my flips taught me and prepared me for the next flip that I did. I have flipped over several houses. I'll link them somewhere here in this area. And each one taught me something. And so I'm sure that as I continue to flip more, that I will continue to learn more. And so whenever you go into it, you want to make sure that your mindset is right. And I've mentioned that on several of my other videos. If you don't have your mindset right, this type of business could be something that you will find yourself very frustrated about, you may decide that you want to give up. But I encourage you to not give up, because just as with anything in life, there's always something that may not work out, or may not work in the way that you feel that and let me emphasize, the way that you feel that it should be. But there is always something, if you look back on your life, there's always something that was there to help you learn something and to make you a better person. I'm sure that you can feel or say, it may not be everything, but I'm sure there is something that you can look back over on your life and say that this particular situation helped me, or this particular situation made me better. So that will be the same thing for flipping houses, that you will learn something that's going to make you better. So marketing your property, you want to make sure that you market your property. I always try and sell my properties first on my own to avoid realtor fees. And so I will put them on Zillow or Realtor.com, which is free. They allow you to do that. There are certain paid features that they have on there, but I always use the free features. And I try and sell it for at least a month to try and, get it out there, get the views on there. I haven't successfully been able to sell it on my own yet. I've always had to go and resort to a realtor. However, I do think that it is something that's good, so that you can see the back end of it, and you can kind of understand a little bit better what a realtor does, and know the things that they go through whenever they're trying to sell it. Because I've even tried to do an open house, and I learned that, okay, yeah, it's not just about sitting in a chair. It's not just about putting out signs. You have to be a little bit more aggressive, and you have to be a little bit more open whenever you're doing open houses. So it just gives me another side or another view to be able to see what a realtor goes through whenever they are trying to sell a house. Whenever you get to the point where you're trying to sell your house, timing is always going to be key. The particular market that we are in now, it is a buyer's market. So I keep seeing price drops, price drops, price drops. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind too. Before you actually flip a house, you want to make sure that the market is, I shouldn't say right, because there's never going to be a perfect time to flip a house, because the market could be oversaturated with a whole bunch of houses. It could be interest rates. You never know. Okay, so it's a whole bunch of things. So to me, in my opinion, there's never a real better time to sell a house. I am mindful at the market whenever I'm trying to sell a house or before I actually flip it, because that will tell me, number one, do I need to consider having it on the market a little bit longer, which means I need to increase my holding costs. Does that mean that because it's sitting on the market that construction costs are up? So I have to take into consideration all those type of things. So whenever you're flipping your house, timing is always key. Timing is always important. So it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about the area, but it's about timing as well. Stay organized. I can't stress that enough. If you are flipping a house, you want to keep up with your expenses. You want to keep up with the interest rates. You want to keep up with every piece of material that you get or you purchase. Keep up with your receipts. I always use at Microsoft Excel in order to help me stay organized, and I just go straight down the list. I have a section for construction costs. I have a section for expenses or utilities. I have a section for everything so that I can keep up with how much I've actually spent on it, and how much my payments are a month. So stay organized. You may decide that you actually want to have a person to come in and stage your house. I haven't staged that many. I think maybe one house that I've actually staged. So staging houses, I've heard people have good experience with it. So it just depends on the particular house that you have on whether or not you want to stage it. Once you have a buyer, again, I mentioned that you may have a buyer that more than likely will have an inspection done. And don't put all your eggs in one basket. Once you get an offer on the house and once you have an accepted offer, things can still wind up falling apart. That they can fall apart at the inspection point. They can, a buyer can always come back and renegotiate after the inspection. A person may actually change their mind actually after and their offer is accepted, and their financing. I've had several where financing actually, even though they were approved by the bank, their financing actually fell apart at the end. And so I had to find another buyer. So don't put your eggs in one basket thinking that just because you have an accepted offer that you're going to make it to the closing table, because sometimes you don't actually make it to the closing table. So keep that in mind. But once you get to the closing table, or actually before you actually get to the closing table, you will have a title company, and that title company will do what is called a title search. A title search is basically when a company does research on the property to make sure that there is something that's called a clear title, and you want to always have a clear title, or actually the buyer's going to want to have clear title, and that basically means that they are able to buy the property with no problems, that there's not an heir that's going to come back later and say that this is their property, or that the mineral rights weren't included. Typically, I recommend the title company that I used when I closed so that we can have a quicker close. And I know that the title research has already been done, but that doesn't mean that the buyer is always going to want to go with that title company. But I always do suggest it, and that makes the closing go a lot faster because they don't have to do any more research because the research has already been done. So keep that in mind. So now that you've heard all these tips and things that I will recommend, hopefully you will have a better understanding of flipping houses and have a little bit more of a guidance as to whether or not you should go ahead and venture into flipping houses. Please feel free to drop down in the comments any thoughts or any questions that you may have on flipping houses. Also, please visit my channel at housefliptoolkit.com, where I have several more videos that I have tips and blogs and vlogs and a whole host of information that I hope that you will enjoy. I am new to filming, so be aware that there may be, or not maybe, there are plenty of mistakes that I've made in trying to get this information out to you. And so the content is good, but the filming may not be good. So I'm just letting you know. But I'm working on it. I've gotten a lot better than I did for my first video. My first video is horrible. You can actually go and take a look at it because it's still up. But it has some good information in there for you. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and hopefully it gave you some assistance. I will be doing some classes maybe later on. Who knows? It just depends on how this channel goes. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and happy flipping.